Hi, men and women of recovery. I'd like to just chat to you. The weeks of lockdown are ticking by. Our levels of uncertainty and anxiety are not being alleviated. And this social distancing idea seems to be creating a variety of various levels of antisocial reactions. Many people seem to thrive in that atmosphere of protest, especially on social media. And do you know what? It would appear that they can actually afford to rant and to rave. But if you, like me, are navigating a recovery program, there are some emotional and psychological privileges that we would really do well not investing into. The list is long. I'll keep it brief. Resentments, blame, a sense of injustice, judgmentalism, unrealistic expectations on self, others, and governments, self-pity, insisting on carrying around holding on to that string that's attached to a cloud of impending doom. All of these and more have proven beyond a shadow of a doubt throughout the decades since AA was born to be good currency for relapse. If you, like me, are navigating a recovery program, the spiritual, psychological, and emotional turbulence that we are currently experiencing is of a unique quality of danger for every one of us. Having had a spiritual awakening, I got clean in prison in 1993. I had been inside for 14 months at that point, and from the very second that I encountered my spiritual awakening, a deep-seated sense of peace and security and connection actually replaced a lifetime of uncertainty, insecurity, and need. During that last prison sentence, I attended 2 meetings a week. And as I have now been listening to my many friends and ex-clients who are navigating a recovery program, many of them are starting to sound like the prison group that I was a member of. Resentful, blaming, that it's not fair. They become judgmental, unnecessarily negative. They have unrealistic expectations on the prison staff, on family members at home. They're feeling quite sorry for themselves, giving into that impending sense of doom. Every one of my prison group at that time, including me, was still using. We attended the meetings to look good in the eyes of the prison system. We wanted parole. My spiritual awakening happened at 8:40 p.m. on Thursday the 17th of June 1993. And even though I still had 6 months left behind the door, I somehow knew, experienced freedom. I irritated a lot of group members from that point forward, from the moment of my spiritual awakening. Meeting after meeting, 2 meetings a week, I irritated everybody in the group because all I wanted to talk about was my spiritual awakening, the peace, the sense of security, that sense of belonging at last. It pissed a lot of people off, but jealousy does that. Apart from the catastrophic consequences of COVID-19. Lockdown has been an amazing time. I actually own and run a clinic. And a lot of the time, me beating the drum for the spiritual component of recovery is still irritating people. But I've got to say it, man. For my friends and ex-clients in recovery, if you're now getting in touch with that restless, irritable, short-tempered, inconsiderate self that you don't like, I'm duty bound to suggest that you truly and sincerely return to steps 1, 2, and 3. I'm pretty sure the AA Big Book tells us that there is a spiritual principle that blocks us from entertaining information that we've already closed the door on because we don't like the sound of it. That spiritual principle silences all arguments and actually keeps a man in everlasting ignorance. That principle, contempt prior to investigation. At the start of my journey, I was obnoxious about the God of my understanding. And now, 27 years on, I still have to be careful, but I'm still just as convinced. A restless soul is the cry for a spiritual awakening. If you will allow me, I'd like to offer a series of experience-based and clinically seasoned talks on 12 steps and 12 biblical parallels of the steps. You'll find it interesting, to say the least. Martin Lloyd-Jones, exercising his gift of exactitude, once said, preaching is theology, the logic of God. Preaching is theology coming through a man who is on fire. He's projecting biblical principles as well as common sense. Today, in my opinion, contemporary religion has been invaded by intellectuals projecting inspirational information which only ever really makes just enough sense to keep people needing more, but very little sense to the common people because it only ever points back to themselves and promotes what a wonderful denomination they are. When it comes to preachers, teachers and leaders of our cultures, we only really have access to 6 types of message: educational, informational, devotional, motivational, inspirational and incarnational. Educational, it's academic. Informational, always helpful. Devotional, spiritual. Motivational, gives you a direction. Inspirational, gives you an example. Incarnational is life-changing. Today, in my opinion, the global addicted community has been invaded by intellectuals projecting inspirational information which only ever really makes just enough sense to keep people needing them, but very little sense to common people, because it only ever points back to themselves and promotes what a great therapist they are, what a great clinic they are, what a great program we are. As a theologically therapeutic addiction specialist, my prayer for you is that you find this next series of comparative studies, this 12v12, life-changing. With that in mind, let me introduce you to step 1 and its context from the 12-step recovery program. Admitted we were powerless over our addiction and our lives became unmanageable. Hi, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the introduction lecture of this series of talks on the 12 steps and 12 biblical parallels. I'm pretty sure if you give yourself a break, particularly during lockdown, you'll find this quite entertaining at the very least. Okay, we're going to be looking at step 1 first. We admitted we were powerless over our addiction and our lives become unmanageable. Now, having lectured on this step for 20 years plus, I'm still convinced that step 1 is actually 2 steps. It's admitted we were powerless over our addiction and our lives become unmanageable. For me personally, I think that should have been 2 steps, but that's just me. That's what we're going to be looking at. Before we go into a lecture on this step, I want to set it and the 12-step recovery program into its historical context. In order to do that, I'm going to take you down a timeline and we're going to go all the way back to 1900 years BC. 1900 BC, Babylonian emperors rewrote their law in order to add drunkenness to the death penalty. 1000 BC, the Holy Book of Hindu warned about the influences within the spirits of alcohol. In 500 years BC, Buddha himself requested abstinence from all spirits. 400 BC, the Roman Empire started to lose control and integrity due to alcohol-related violence, orgies, and general debauchery. In 800 AD, so we're this side of Christ now, 800 AD, Muhammad condemned wine, forbidding his followers to touch it. In 1100 AD, Inca Indians were found to value the coca leaf more than they valued gold and or silver. In 1327, England passed laws to restrict who could sell alcohol, but then quickly abolished the law because they just saw straight away this is a waste of time. In 1606, England changed drunkenness from being a sin to the status of crime. So there again we see alcoholism, drunkenness, changing the law of the country. In 1840, a group of guys calling themselves the Washingtonians got together with the goal of helping alcoholics to stop drinking. They developed a 6-step approach. 1. Help one another. 2. Have weekly meetings. 3. Share honestly with one another. 4. Be available to each other. 5. Rely on God and truth. And 6. Remain abstinent and accountable. Let me just return to their 5th step, rely on God and truth. That was their interpretation of God and their interpretation of what they claimed to be God's truth. By 1841, they had 1,000 members. By 1844, they had 100,000 members. By 1848, they ceased to exist due to arguments about religion, politics, and money. By 1849, a guy by the name of Magnus Huss used the term alcoholism in a medical journal, describing it as a medical condition. In 1851, the process of prohibition started to spread across America. Within 10 years, the entire process went into reverse, and many states started to abolish the idea because it just didn't work. In 1856, the hypodermic needle was introduced to the United States just in time for the Civil War, and with it, the injection of morphine was introduced into wounded soldiers. So many soldiers got addicted to morphine that it became known as morphineism, the soldier's disease. And then get this, injectable cocaine was then used as a cure for morphineism because it offered a painless and euphoric reality. Between 1907 and 1919, prohibition again started in 34 states across America, forbidding the sale or manufacture of alcohol. 2 states gave up the idea quite quickly. 64% of the population lived in dry states. Over 104,000 bars were closed down. During this same period, Russia and France tried to implement prohibition because drunkenness severely hindered the World War I war effort. England also suffered terrible vulnerability due to widespread drunkenness. In 1922, Frank Buchman started a Bible-based Oxford group. Members were urged to confess their sins, surrender to Christ, seek guidance, share with one another. Their aim: absolute purity, absolute love, absolute unselfishness, absolute honesty. To place absolutes on any man is not biblical. In 1929, the Valentine's Day Massacre revolved around the manufacture of and the sale of alcohol. In 1935, Alcoholics Anonymous was born as an offshoot from the Oxford group, and it was only at that time that someone said something along the lines of, we need to stop and we need to concede to the fact that as soon as we even start to entertain the idea of taking a drink, the mental obsession becomes stronger than any level of logic or loyalty until we drink, from which point we lose the power to stop. and life re-enters that spiral out of control. By 1944, the National Council of Alcoholism was formed in New York City. By 1948, the World Health Organization declared alcoholism as a major world health problem. And in 1956, the American Medical Association declared alcoholism to be a treatable medical condition and defined it as a disease. The American Heart Association fell in line and said it needs to be treated in hospitals. The American Psychiatric Association officially listed the issue as a treatable mental illness. And so we find history is peppered with attempts to manage, understand, control and or diagnose the phenomenon known as chemical dependency. All we are left with is an encyclopedia of mixed messages. At the production of this presentation, 2020, Private Sector Treatment for Addictions, the phenomenon that has evolved from crime, once punishable by death, to an asset more valuable than gold, to a mental illness needing hospital treatment, can run into a personal expense of tens and hundreds of thousands of pounds per person. God bless AA. Step 1. Admitted we were powerless over our addiction and our lives became unmanageable. Okay guys, you see the context within which step 1 belongs in the big picture of the 12-step recovery program. You see the size of the problem. And you know what? Most of us, for many years, convince ourselves that we can change history all over again by beating alcoholism / addiction on our own. Do you see what the world is up against with this plague of chemical dependency? It is bigger than we ever imagined. All right, so hopefully step 1 might start to feel a little more comfortable for us now, but I don't want to venture too far too quickly. All right, as you saw in the PowerPoint presentation, I placed specific emphasis within the middle of reading out step 1. We admitted we were powerless over our addiction and our lives became unmanageable. This is what we're like when we come out of the drug culture. In the drug culture, we blend in. We're dying from chameleonology. We say yes because they say yes, no because they say no. We walk like they walk, talk like they talk, dress like they dress. We make the same mannerisms as them. We become a clone or a clone of the culture. We just blend in. When we start to claw our way out of the culture and into recovery, we're so empty, lost, broken, alone and scared, we do the same thing, man. We hear something in the meeting and because everybody agrees with it, we nod along and we never challenge anything, okay? I'm going to put it to you that step 1 should have been 2 steps. We admitted we were powerless over our addiction. That makes so much sense to me. It made so much sense to me. And then it says, and our lives became unmanageable. To try and consume, to try and absorb all that information in one hook is a bit much. It was for me, and I couldn't. I showed it contempt because I didn't know how to investigate it. Okay, this is how much I know about my addiction, and I'm going to take a guess. I'm going to take a gamble. I don't gamble, but I'm going to take a gamble that this applies to your addiction as well, to you and your addiction. If you could have beaten it by now, you would have done. If you think you can, because we're on lockdown now, everybody's fed up and bored and all that other nonsense. If entertaining thoughts of returning to the substance is taking place, if we are entertaining those thoughts, we are planting seeds for as soon as the lockdown is released. Okay, here's the thing, steps 1, 2, 3. Okay, we need to reabsorb ourselves in steps 1, 2 and 3. All right, I'm coming from my own, that's my camera, that's my laptop, this is my presentation. And after 27 years of recovery, I think you might enjoy what's on offer here. But I need to stay faithful to my program. I need to stay faithful and committed and focused on my experience, strength and hope. Therefore, I'm going to go through a series of lectures on steps 1 to 12, okay, the various stages of the program, and I'm also going to share a biblical parallel to each of these steps, okay? Because for the record, I re-entered the education system and I went to Bible college for 4 years. I was 7 years clean when I went to Bible college for 4 years. Okay, so I have a theology degree. Okay? I'm not trying to Christianize you. I'm not trying to Bible bash you. I just want to show you some stuff, man. It is astounding. I cannot believe how much I didn't know. Yeah. Okay, my name's Colin. I love you. I'll be back whenever I get back. Okay, so I'm going to do a step 1 lecture now. I'm going to split step 1 in half, and I want to talk to you with common sense, man. I want to speak to you. The heart of the problem is the problem of the heart. Let's get to know each other. See you soon.